Hi, this is Mahavan Das. Welcome to Simple Gita Chapter 12. This chapter is entitled Devotional Service. Let's take a look at the connection between it and the previous chapter. Although it has been emphasized in Chapter 11 that meditation on Krishna's personal form is the highest spiritual realization, still there are those who like to meditate on the impersonal Brahman effulgence. So in chapter 12, Arjuna enquires about two classes of spiritualists, those who meditate on Krishna's personal form and those who try to meditate on the impersonal Brahman. And he asks, which group are considered more perfect? Here's our overview of chapter 12. To answer Arjuna's question, as he has done in previous chapters, Krishna explains in chapter 12 that those who meditate on his personal form, the Bhakti yogis, are the highest yogis, and Bhakti yoga is the most perfect process for realizing the absolute truth. He goes on to describe how Bhakti yoga can be practiced at different levels, and the qualities of a pure Bhakti yogi that make him dear to Krishna. Let's check out the first verse and purport for this chapter from Bhagavad Gita as it is. Arjuna inquired, which are considered to be more perfect, those who are always properly engaged in your devotional service, or those who worship the impersonal Brahman, the unmanifested? Srila Prabhupada's purport. Krishna has now explained about the personal, the impersonal, and the universal, and has described all kinds of devotees and yogis. Generally, the transcendentalists can be divided into two classes. One is the impersonalist, and the other is the personalist. The personalist devotee engages himself with all energy in the service of the Supreme Lord. The impersonalist also engages himself, not directly in the service of Krishna, but in meditation on the impersonal Brahman, the unmanifested. We find in this chapter that of the different processes for realization of the absolute truth, Bhakti Yoga, devotional service, is the highest. If one at all desires to have the association of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, then he must take to devotional service. Those who worship the Supreme Lord directly by devotional service are called personalists. Those who engage themselves in meditation on the impersonal Brahman are called impersonalists. Arjuna is here questioning which position is better. There are different ways to realize the absolute truth, but Krishna indicates in this chapter that Bhakti Yoga, or devotional service to him, is the highest of all. It is the most direct, and it is the easiest means for association with the Godhead. In the second chapter of Bhagavad Gita, the Supreme Lord explained that a living entity is not the material body. He is a spiritual spark, and the absolute truth is the spiritual whole. In the 7th chapter, he spoke of the living entity as being part and parcel of the supreme whole, and recommended that he transfer his attention fully to the whole. Then again, in the 8th chapter, it was said that anyone who thinks of Krishna at the time of quitting his body is at once transferred to the spiritual sky, to the abode of Krishna. And at the end of the 6th chapter, the Lord clearly said that of all yogis, one who always thinks of Krishna within himself is considered the most perfect. So in practically every chapter, the conclusion has been that one should be attached to the personal form of Krishna, for that is the highest spiritual realization. Nevertheless, there are those who are not attached to the personal form of Krishna. They are so firmly detached that even in the preparation of commentaries to Bhagavad Gita, they want to distract other people from Krishna and transfer all devotion to the impersonal Brahma Jyotir. They prefer to meditate on the impersonal form of the absolute truth, which is beyond the reach of the senses and is not manifest. So, factually, there are two classes of transcendentalists. Now, Arjuna is trying to settle the question of which process is easier and which of the classes is most perfect. In other words, he is clarifying his own position because he is attached to the personal form of Krishna. He is not attached to the impersonal Brahman. He wants to know whether his position is secure. The impersonal manifestation either in this material world or in the spiritual world of the Supreme Lord, is a problem for meditation. Actually, one cannot properly conceive of the impersonal feature of the Absolute Truth. Therefore, Arjuna wants to say, what is the use of such a waste of time? Arjuna experienced in the 11th chapter that to be attached to the personal form of Krishna is best, because he could thus understand all other forms at the same time, and there was no disturbance to his love for Krishna. This important question asked of Krishna by Arjuna will clarify the distinction between the impersonal and personal conceptions of the Absolute Truth. Let's go over the key points here in chapter 12. The first key point we get is, as we just heard, Arjuna's inquiry. Who is better, the personalist or the impersonalist? As Srila Prabhupada explained in the purport, a personalist is someone who worships Krishna's personal form, while an impersonalist meditates on the impersonal Brahman. So Arjuna's question is, who is better? We may need to clarify this term impersonal Brahman. What does that mean? It's the manifestation of the Supreme as spiritual energy. And in that spiritual energy there are no varieties, there is no individuality, and there are also no activities. There is just undifferentiated oneness. You may have heard the term the white light. So that is what is being referred to here in this term, the impersonal Brahman. And we'll see in chapter 14, at the end of that chapter, Krishna explains that this impersonal Brahman manifestation, this all-pervasive spiritual energy, this white light, is actually based on his personality. The impersonal Brahman is here called unmanifested because we can't perceive it. And actually, not only can we not perceive it in our present state, our conditioned state here in this world, but we can't even conceive of it. It's inconceivable, an unlimited spiritual energy without any varieties, individuality, activities, just undifferentiated oneness. Practically impossible for us to even conceive of that. As Srila Prabhupada explains here in the purport, Arjuna wants to clarify his own position because he's a personalist. He wants to know, is my position as a devotee, meaning one who's attached to Krishna's personal form, secure? Should I give up meditating on Krishna's personal form and do as some others do and try to meditate on the impersonal Brahman, the unmanifested? The next key point we get here is personalists versus impersonalists and the supremacy of Krishna Bhakti. In answering Arjuna's question, Krishna says that the pure Bhakti yogis, his pure devotees, are most perfect in yoga. He says, those who fix their minds on my personal form and are always engaged in worshipping me with great and transcendental faith are considered by me to be most perfect. He then goes on to explain that the path of impersonal Brahman worship is troublesome because it goes against the active and personal nature of the soul. That also means it goes against the emotional nature of the spirit soul. Krishna says, for those whose minds are attached to the unmanifested, impersonal feature of the Supreme, advancement is very troublesome. To make progress in that discipline is always difficult for those who are embodied. Srila Prabhupada comments here. For those who are following the impersonal way to spiritual realization, the path is difficult. They have to understand the unmanifested representation of the Supreme through such Vedic literatures as the Upanishads, and they have to learn the language, understand the non-perceptual feelings, and realize all these processes. This is not very easy for a common man. There is no doubt that the impersonalists are unnecessarily taking a troublesome path with the risk of not realizing the absolute truth at the ultimate end. As opposed to the impersonal path, there is the personal path of Bhakti Yoga, which Srila Prabhupada explains as the simple and easy path. He says, it is the most direct and it is the easiest means for association with the Godhead. He says, a person in Krishna consciousness engaged in devotional service simply by the guidance of a bona fide spiritual master, simply by offering regulative obeisances to the deity, simply by hearing the glories of the Lord, and simply by eating the remnants of foodstuffs offered to the Lord, realizes the Supreme Personality of Godhead very easily. The personalist, without any risk, trouble, or difficulty, approaches the Supreme Personality directly. The next key point we get in the chapter is the progressive stages of bhakti. So after establishing that bhakti yoga is the superlative process for realizing the absolute truth, it's the easiest, it's the most direct, and it enables one to realize Krishna's personal form, his ultimate manifestation as the absolute truth. Krishna then brings up progressive stages of bhakti. In other words, bhakti yoga is not a black or white or an all or nothing thing. It's not that you're necessarily in or out. There are progressive stages in the process. So the first stage he mentions is the perfectional stage. That means a stage in which the bhakti yogi has fully fixed their mind and intelligence on Krishna, and in this way they always live in Krishna consciousness, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. They're always engaged in meditating on and pleasing the Supreme. Now, this is the highest level, so not everybody can immediately achieve that. So Krishna explains a level down, which is bhakti in practice. This level means having this highest stage of Krishna consciousness, where one's always Krishna conscious, as one's goal, but practicing the regulative principles or devotional service in practice to achieve that goal. And Srila Prabhupada explains in his purport what that looks like. He says to practice the regulative principles of Bhakti Yoga, one should, under the guidance of an expert spiritual master, follow certain principles. One should rise early in the morning, take bath, enter the temple and offer prayers and chant Hare Krishna. Then collect flowers to offer to the deity, cook foodstuffs to offer to the deity, take prasadam, spiritual food, and so on. There are various rules and regulations which one should follow, and one should constantly hear Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam from pure devotees. This practice can help anyone rise to the level of love of God, and then he is sure of his progress into the spiritual kingdom of God. This practice of Bhakti Yoga, under the rules and regulations, with the direction of a spiritual master, will surely bring one to the stage of love of God. So by applying these principles, as Srila Prabhupada has summarized here in his purport, the practitioner actually directly associates with Krishna. And the result of that association is that the practitioner's consciousness becomes purified, revealing or uncovering his or her original love of Godhead. As Krishna explained in the 3rd chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, our original desire to love Krishna is now covered by material desire or self-centered desire, called in Sanskrit kama. So this practice of Bhakti Yoga simply means to uncover that original desire. That involves purifying the self-centered desire, and when that self-centered desire is purified or cleansed away, our original desire to love the Supreme is revealed. And naturally, as one makes progress in this process of purification, more and more one becomes situated in one's original love for the Supreme. Now, it may be that that level might be too much of a stretch for us as well. So then Krishna explains a level down from there. This level is called working for Krishna. Working for Krishna means offering the results of our work as a service to his mission in this world. So we all work in some kind of way in this world, and that work produces results. For example, an artist works producing art. They produce some photos, they produce some paintings, they produce some kind of artwork, music. So that's a result of their work. Now, if they can use that result for Krishna's mission, to help Krishna spread his mission in this world, that becomes devotional service. Similarly, a business person produces something by their business endeavors, and that is a profit. So if they can use that profit to assist Krishna's mission in this world, that becomes devotional service. Similarly, someone could be an administrator, so they have the skill or the ability to manage, to organize, to administrate. If they can do that for Krishna's mission, that becomes devotional service. Similarly, one may be an intellectual or a teacher. So if one uses that ability and teaches Krishna's message to others, then that also becomes devotional service. So in this way, we can work for Krishna by utilizing the results of whatever work we're already doing in the service of Krishna's mission, and we can make advancement in Bhakti Yoga. So we have the highest level, which is Bhakti Yoga in perfection, fully fixing the mind and intelligence on Krishna. Then we have a step down, Bhakti Yoga in practice, following the regulative principles of Bhakti Yoga, and in this way purifying the consciousness to come to that highest standard. And then we have a step lower again, which is working for Krishna, offering the results of our work as a service to his mission. Now, if one can't practice any of these three, Krishna goes on to say, one can give up the results of one's work to a good material cause, so some kind of charity or something like that. The principle here is that by giving in this way, one is giving up one's self-centeredness to some degree, and that's favorable for spiritual advancement. Krishna then goes on to say that better than that, though, is to cultivate knowledge of what is matter, what is spirit, etc. And better than that is meditation on the supersoul. And better than that is working for Krishna. So here we get an understanding of the two paths that are recommended in yoga wisdom. We have the direct path, which was those first three levels, and we also have the indirect path. Because not everyone can immediately accept the direct path of Bhakti Yoga. An indirect path is also given so that everyone can at least make some gradual progress towards the ultimate goal. However, the indirect path does require generally many lifetimes of practice to come to that ultimate goal, and it also requires a favorable culture. And in this age, we don't have a favorable culture for this particular path, the indirect path. So what is recommended in this age is the direct path. And the final key point we get in this chapter is the qualities of a bhakti yogi that endear him or her to Krishna. A pure bhakti yogi, as mentioned in the 8th text, has all the good qualities. This is one of the ways to evaluate one's spiritual progress. This is a good barometer to measure one's progress on the spiritual path. How much have I developed the good qualities? And Krishna lists them here. He says, one who is not envious, but is a kind friend to all living entities, who does not think himself a proprietor and is free from false ego, who is equal in both happiness and distress, who is tolerant, always satisfied, self-controlled, and engaged in devotional service with determination, his mind and intelligence fixed on me. Such a devotee of mine is very dear to me. He by whom no one is put into difficulty and who is not disturbed by anyone, who is equipoised in happiness and distress, fear and anxiety, is very dear to me. My devotee who is not dependent on the ordinary course of activities, who is pure, expert, without cares, free from all pains, and not striving for some result, is very dear to me. One who neither rejoices nor grieves, who neither laments nor desires, and who renounces both auspicious and inauspicious things. Such a devotee is very dear to me. One who is equal to friends and enemies, who is equipoised in honour and dishonour, heat and cold, happiness and distress, fame and infamy, who is always free from contaminating association, always silent and satisfied with anything, who doesn't care for any residence, who is fixed in knowledge, and who is engaged in devotional service. Such a person is very dear to me. Regarding these qualities of the pure devotee, Srila Prabhupada says, we may find some repetition in the descriptions of the qualifications of a devotee, but this is just to emphasize the fact that a devotee must acquire all these qualifications. Without good qualifications, one cannot be a pure devotee. One who wants to be recognized as a devotee should develop the good qualifications. Of course, he does not extraneously endeavor to acquire these qualifications, but engagement in Krishna consciousness and devotional service automatically helps him develop them. So, the qualification of bhakti is the primary amongst all of these qualities mentioned here by Krishna, while the others are secondary, and they are a natural consequence of bhakti or devotion to Krishna. Let's summarize the chapter. At the beginning of this chapter, we've heard Arjuna ask an essential philosophical question. Who is better, a personalist or impersonalist? And Krishna answered that the personalist or bhakti yogi is the most perfect. Krishna then explained various levels at which bhakti yoga can be performed, and both the direct and indirect paths mentioned in yoga wisdom. He concluded by explaining the qualities that endear his devotees to him. Let's preview Chapter 13. Chapter 13 is entitled Nature, the Enjoyer, and Consciousness. The middle 6 chapters of the Bhagavad Gita directly explain and glorify the top rung on the yoga ladder, Bhakti Yoga. The first 6 chapters showed how karma or action can lead to bhakti, while the last 6 chapters, beginning with chapter 13, show how jnana or metaphysical knowledge can also lead to bhakti. In chapter 13, Krishna gives detailed metaphysical knowledge of the body, the soul, the supersoul, material nature, and the process of gaining spiritual knowledge. Thank you so much for joining me today in this class on Chapter 12, Devotional Service, and I look forward to seeing you for the next class on Chapter 13, Nature, the Enjoyer, and Consciousness.